Welcome to the April masterclass presentation. This month the topic is crafting a great villain. In many ways, the truly evil or powerful villain is the most important character in your entire story. Harry Potter without Voldemort would be just another sniveling brat. Luke without Darth Vader, just another hick farm boy. Without a proper and worthy bad guy, there is no story. It is important to take as much care designing and showcasing your antagonist as your protagonist. So, here it is, live from Socorro, Texas, and the Pavo Real Writing Group, crafting a proper villain.
Imagine Superman hovering high above the skyscrapers of Metropolis. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, citizens are going about their day completely safely, and the streets are just perfectly quiet.
Sounds like a nice Tuesday.
Right. But Superman is completely, utterly bored. And why? Because Lex Luthor decided to just stay in bed today.
Yeah, he took a personal day.
Exactly. I mean, writers obsess over their heroes. They'll spend months, sometimes years, agonizing over a protagonist, giving them the perfect tragic backstory and the right mix of endearing flaws.
Building this massive, triumphant character arc.
Exactly. But here is a really provocative, completely counterintuitive thought from sources we're looking at today. The hero actually isn't the most important character in a story. The villain is.
It sounds like a total contradiction of everything we are taught about storytelling, doesn't it? We're conditioned from childhood to just worship the protagonist.
Right.
But if you strip a narrative down to its absolute bare mechanics and just remove all the emotional attachment, the villain is the literal engine of the entire conflict.
The engine. I like that.
Yeah. If you think about that Superman example, without someone like Lex Luthor or General Zod actively causing unmitigated chaos, Superman has absolutely no reason to do anything.
He's just a very strong guy flying around in spandex with nowhere to be.
Exactly. The hero, by definition, only reacts. The villain is the one who acts.
And that reality brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We're going to decode the anatomy of a truly unforgettable villain.
That's going to be fun.
It is. We have two incredible guides on the table to help us do this. An insightful analytical piece by Jerry Jenkins on what actually makes a great villain, and Sacha Black's wonderfully titled guide, 5 Tips for Writing Super Bad Villains.
This is for bad villains.
We are going to break down exactly what makes a bad guy tick. But before we get into the mechanics, I have a foundational question for you.
Okay, lay on to me.
If the villain is the absolute engine of the story, why do so many of them feel so incredibly flat and boring when we read a book or watch a movie?
Oh, that is the million-dollar question. To understand how to build a great one, we first have to deconstruct the biggest, most pervasive mistake that creators make.
Okay.
And it really boils down to a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. The mistake is creating bad guys who are, well, only bad.
Yeah.
They do evil things simply because the plot requires them to be evil.
Jerry Jenkins calls this the central casting melodrama villain, which is just such a vivid image.
It really is.
We all know exactly the type of character he means. It's the walking cliché who wanders into the story wearing a black top hat and a dark cape, constantly twirling a handlebar mustache.
Right, tying someone to the train tracks.
Exactly. He exists for one solitary reason, so the audience has a designated target to boo and hiss at every time he enters the room. You can have a story where every other character is incredibly nuanced and real, but the antagonist is just a cardboard cutout of wickedness.
And the psychological root of why writers fall into that central casting trap is actually fascinating. Why do intelligent, perceptive creators suddenly rely on cardboard cutouts?
Right, like what happens in their brain?
It's because, fundamentally, writers view themselves as the heroes of their own lives. They want to see themselves doing the right thing, rising to the challenge, and saving the day.
We all do, honestly.
We do. But because of that psychological defense mechanism, they genuinely believe they cannot relate to true, unadulterated evil. They look at a villain and think, I am nothing like that, so I just have to construct them as a completely alien monster.
But Jenkins argues something radically different here.
He does. He says villains are not monsters born in the dark. They are simply real people to whom terrible things have happened. And at some crucial point in their lives, rather than learning and growing from that trauma, their maturation process stunted and completely stalled.
Stalled growth.
Yes. And that stalled growth is exactly where the bitterness takes root.
I have to admit, I read that part of the text, and my immediate reaction was exactly what Jenkins predicts. I thought, but I'm not a psychopath. I'm not Dracula or Professor Moriarty or some terrible historical dictator.
Right, how do you access that?
Yeah, how on earth do I access that level of stunted malice? And Jenkins provides this incredibly uncomfortable but brilliant thought experiment that I want to walk you through right now.
Oh, this is a good one.
Think about a time a friend, someone you deeply trusted, blatantly took credit for your hard work and stole your accomplishment. Or think of a time someone you love looked you right in the eye and blatantly lied to your face.
Just think about the heat in your face in that exact moment, that immediate physiological reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What was your visceral, private reaction in that split second before your mature, rational adult self took over?
Before you cool down.
Right, before you took a deep breath and bit your tongue for the sake of the relationship. In that microsecond, you were crushed, offended, and utterly infuriated.
Oh, yeah.
You probably wanted to destroy their reputation or inflict exactly the amount of pain on them that they just inflicted on you.
We've all been there.
Jenkins says that dark, unedited, petty, infuriated space is exactly where a villain's mindset lives. They just never let the rational adult step in to cool them down.
That is the core of it. They set up camp in that visceral reaction, build a whole worldview around it, and refuse to move on.
Wow.
It is a profound realization because it means you don't have to be a psychopath to understand a villain. You just have to be willing to tap into your own dark side, your own moments of intense, petty grievance, and permanently amplify them.
You have to imagine what your life would look like if you let the bitterness win every single internal argument.
Right.
Okay, I buy that on a psychological level. But once you've tapped into that dark, stunted emotional space, feelings alone don't actually drive a narrative forward.
No, they don't.
I mean, you can have a character who is incredibly bitter and angry, but if they just sit in a dark room stewing in their own resentment for 300 pages, you still don't have a plot. A resentful guy in a basement isn't a threat.
Precisely. The villain needs an actual, actionable plan.
Right.
The psychology is the foundation, but it has to translate into kinetic action. This is where Sacha Black's insights become incredibly valuable to the equation.
Sacha Black's golden rule.
Yes, she introduces this golden rule for writing antagonists. Every villain is the hero of their own story. They do not wake up, look in the mirror, and ask themselves, how can I be diabolical and ruin the world today?
They genuinely think they are right.
They believe they are fixing a broken system or claiming what is justly theirs. And to make those world-destroying plans convincing to the reader, Black laid out a very specific formula. Why plus motive equals villain action.
Let's apply that formula because Black uses a universally understood example to prove how effective this is. The Lion King.
Oh, classic.
Yeah.
Huh.
If we look at Scar, he isn't just evil uncle. Scar's why, his past wound, his stunted maturation, is the fact that he grew up physically weaker, living entirely in the massive shadow of his brother, Mufasa.
He was always second best, always overlooked, and always feeling inadequate. That is his core wound.
Then you add his motive,
Yeah.
which is his jealous, burning belief that he is intellectually superior and therefore rightfully deserves the crown. You add that specific why and that burning motive together, and you get his ruthless villain action, which is murdering his own brother and usurping the throne.
And notice how that action makes complete logical sense to Scar. In his mind, he is correcting a historical mistake.
It's justice to him.
Exactly. And structurally, if we look at the mechanics of the story, this equation proves the absolute necessity of the villain's internal logic. Without Scar's deeply personal why, there is no motive.
Without the motive, there is no action.
And without that murder, Simba just lives a happy, unchallenged life in the Pride Lands eating bugs and singing songs. There is zero friction.
Hakuna Matata forever.
Yeah, but that's a boring movie. The villain's distorted pursuit of their own justice is the very thing that gives the hero a reason to transform.
But let's say the villain has a solid motive and they finally take action. What if that action is just, well, vague? What if they just threaten to blow up a random city?
Broad conflict.
Right. Sacha Black has this hilarious analogy about creating specific conflict that really stood out to me. She says that creating broad, non-specific conflict is like walking into a bar on a Friday night and ordering half a shot of tequila.
Which, if you think about it, it's just a fundamentally absurd thing to do.
Right. I read that and thought, wait, who on earth orders half a shot of tequila?
Nobody.
And Black's point is that nobody does, unless you are incredibly cheap or just a coward. Because all you are doing with a half measure like that is shortchanging yourself. You don't get the fun of the Friday night, but you still guarantee yourself a Saturday morning hangover.
Terrible trade-off.
Now, obviously, nobody in the real world actually wants an ethanol-induced hangover. But when we are talking about engaging with the story, readers do want a book hangover.
That's a great term, the book hangover. It's that lingering obsessive feeling where you cannot stop thinking about the conflict in the story even days after you've finished reading it.
It's when the story gets under your skin.
And you cannot achieve that feeling with half measures or generic threats. To get that reaction, the conflict cannot be a generalized, vague threat to the universe. It has to be intensely specific and deeply personal to the protagonist.
The example Black uses for this highlights exactly how ridiculous broad conflict can be. Imagine you have an evil science genius who hacks into a television broadcast and threatens to release a deadly, world-ending plague.
Okay, classic trope.
But then you find out the plague might only affect ostriches.
Ostriches.
Right. Nobody is getting out of bed to save the world from an ostrich plague. The stakes are completely untethered from the human experience.
It's hilarious but true.
Compare that generic threat to Scar again. Scar doesn't just want to take over some random neighboring animal kingdom that we don't care about. He specifically targets his own brother and his own nephew. The betrayal is intimate.
And that intimacy of conflict leads directly into Sokka Black's next crucial metric for a great antagonist. The threat must be specific, yes, but the villain themselves must also seem, for the vast majority of the story, utterly undefeatable.
Undefeatable.
Readers absolutely hate a hero who wins easily. If the protagonist can defeat the antagonist with a mere waft of their shapely biceps, as Black memorably puts it, the entire story feels cheap.
Waft of shapely biceps. That is such a good line.
It's perfect, because it feels completely unearned. Real life is not easy, and overcoming profound obstacles requires sacrifice. The barrier the villain presents must seem, for about 85% of the narrative, completely insurmountable.
85% insurmountable. I mean, that is a massive wall to climb. But how do you actually build a villain that feels that undefeatable without cheating? If you just make them a literal, omnipotent god, it feels like bad writing.
You don't make them a god, you make them an unparalleled expert in something massive that the hero is terrible at.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if your villain has spent the last 30 years amassing huge armies, managing logistics, and perfecting military strategy, your rookie hero is going to genuinely struggle to gather a rabble of untrained misfits to defeat him.
That makes sense.
The sheer competence of the villain forces the hero to grow, to struggle, and to bleed for the victory. But the absolute most effective way to make a villain seem unbeatable is to inextricably link their power to the hero's own internal flaw.
The Marvel Thor example from the text perfectly illustrates why this works so well.
Yes, Loki.
The dynamic in that first Thor movie is brilliant because it's not just a punching contest. Thor is incredibly powerful physically, but he is fundamentally arrogant, selfish, and reckless.
Right.
Because of that specific internal flaw, his father curses his magical hammer. The very weapon Thor needs to defeat the villain, Loki, is locked away from him.
And it's not because Loki is physically stronger. He isn't.
Right. It's because Thor's own character is lacking. Loki remains completely unbeatable until Thor undergoes an agonizing personal character arc, learns actual humility, and proves himself worthy.
If Loki was just a big monster, Thor would just hit him harder and the movie would be 10 minutes long. The villain is the anvil upon which the hero's new, better self is forced to be forged.
Okay, but let's say I follow all of this advice. I tap into that dark psychological space, I give my villain a deeply personal motive, and I make them an absolute mastermind whose power perfectly exploits the hero's flaw.
You've got a great setup.
But aren't I just risking creating another type of cliché? The omnipotent, brooding, evil genius is a trope all on its own. How do creators navigate all these rules without making the character feel predictable?
That is the tightrope walk of storytelling.
Okay.
It requires a masterclass in navigating expectations, and that starts with understanding the critical structural difference between cliches and tropes.
Which people mix up all the time.
All the time. People often use those words interchangeably in everyday conversation, but in narrative architecture, they are absolute opposites.
Let's break that down.
A cliché induces a physical cringe. It is lazy shorthand. It is the cackling witch with a giant wart on her nose. It is the bad guy dressed head to toe in black leather, sipping a glass of red wine while sitting under a giant brooding oil portrait of himself next to a roaring fireplace.
I can picture that exact guy perfectly, and I am already totally bored by whatever he has to say.
Exactly. Cliches are old, tired, and they sneak into the work when a creator stops thinking critically.
Hmm.
But a trope is a necessary structural pattern. Sacha Black says stories need tropes, like the human body needs oxygen.
Wow, like oxygen.
They are the foundational architecture of a genre. In a fantasy epic, the trope might be the ancient magical sword that must be retrieved from a perilous cave. In a gritty crime thriller, it is the maverick detective whose underhanded rule-breaking tactics are the only thing that can crack the case.
Their expectations.
Yes, tropes deliver on the implicit promise you made to the reader when they decided to engage with that specific genre. Tropes satisfy. Cliches violate the audience's intelligence.
So how do we use those necessary tropes to build the actual personality of the villain without crossing the line into cliché? Jerry Jenkins provides what I think is the ultimate checklist of villain characteristics here.
It's a fantastic list.
And when you look closely at this checklist, it is entirely about utilizing contradictions. Contradictions are what create the illusion of depth.
Yes, layers.
For example, as we discussed, the villain must be thoroughly convinced they are the good guy, but they also must possess begrudgingly respectable skills. Number 6 on his checklist states very clearly, the villain cannot be a fool or a bumbler.
Because if your highly trained hero defeats a complete idiot, your hero hasn't actually accomplished anything impressive.
Right. And number 7, the villain should share many of the exact same characteristics as the hero, but they are misdirected. Again, it's that mirror effect we saw with Thor and Loki.
But this raises a deeply uncomfortable question when we look at the rest of Jenkins's checklist. It gets to the very core of our relationship with antagonists, and it's something most people really don't want to admit.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
How much should we actually like the bad guy?
That was the most surprising part of the whole text for me. Jenkins says explicitly that you and your reader should actually enjoy it when the villain is on stage.
You should look forward to it.
The villain should have genuinely likable qualities. They should be charismatic or funny or deeply, fiercely loyal to their own inner circle. And here's the specific item that really stopped me in my tracks. Number 8.
Oh, this is the best one.
The villain should occasionally be kind and not just for show.
That is the absolute masterstroke of character design right there. Think about it. A villain who is always screaming, always angry, and constantly kicking every dog they see. Well, that is a cliche. It's cartoonish.
It's central casting again.
Right. But imagine a villain who is utterly merciless to the innocent, who will burn down a village to get what they want, but who also stops to gently feed a stray cat in the ashes, or who genuinely deeply cares for their ailing mother.
That dissonance is terrifying.
It is terrifying because it breaks the illusion that they are just a monster.
Precisely. It reminds us that they are profoundly human. It makes their evil choices feel like actual choices rather than just automated programming.
Exactly. A robot programmed to destroy is dangerous. But a human being who has the clear capacity for empathy and kindness, but actively chooses ruthlessness when it serves their motive. That is what haunts a reader. That is what makes them undeniably real.
It is that chilling realization that the monster isn't a monster at all. It's just a person who made a very different set of choices when faced with the cruelty of the world.
It changes everything.
Understanding that completely reframes how we look at the conflict in any story. A villain is not just a cardboard cutout meant to be knocked down so the protagonist can look heroic.
Not at all.
They are a wounded, motivated, highly capable reflection of the hero's own dark side. They provide the essential friction that makes a narrative great. Without their deeply held belief that they are right, there is no tension, there is no growth, and ultimately there is no triumph.
I think the most profound takeaway from all of this isn't just about how to write better fiction. It is about how we understand human conflict itself. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that takes these concepts out of the pages of a novel and into the real world.
Okay, let's hear it.
If villains are just the heroes of their own stories, whose maturations stall due to a perceived trauma, well, it makes you wonder about real-life conflicts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about a specific real-world conflict or a historical event you've been analyzing recently.
Oh, wow.
If you apply that why plus motive equation to the person or group you consider the villain in that scenario, what does their internal narrative actually look like? Remembering that they view themselves as the hero of their own story might completely change how you approach resolving the conflict.
Because at the end of the day, whether it is on the page or in the real world, you can't truly understand the hero's journey until you understand exactly what and who forced them to take that first step. The hero might get all the glory, but the villain is the one pulling the strings. Keep diving deep.